I like it. Gets me excited. Well, welcome to another episode of the Connect Podcast. Man, lots of good things that we're talking about today. We got some man trivia coming up in a little bit. We're going to talk about pornography, everyone's favorite topic.
Should be an exciting day.
That's right. Mr. Matt Manning is here. Reagan is here.
Hi.
Thanks for being with us again, Reagan.
Yeah.
Good to have you. And kicking stuff off today, we just had this huge blizzard come through here in Denver and through the Colorado metro area. And technically, I guess we were trapped in our house for a little bit. It was really funny, actually, because it was supposed to start snowing on Saturday, and it
Thursday.
didn't. Yeah, it just kept getting pushed, right? And everyone's like, oh, where's all the snow? Where's all the snow? And then Sunday hits, and it's like,
yeah, 8 a.m. was like over.
That's right. My friend posted, and he said, for all you snow naysayers out there, is this what you wanted? Is this what you were looking for? So, but it was good. I mean, we did lose power. Did you guys lose power at your house?
Nope, we were all good.
Well, that's good. It dropped to like 64 degrees. But
in your house?
In our house, yeah, because we didn't have heat for a little bit. But it was during the day, and we didn't realize how much we're dependent on like devices.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
When all of a sudden we're like, what are we gonna? And there's no end in sight, and you're like, what are we gonna do with our time?
Candyland again.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
But it was good. It was fun hanging out with the kids and just, surviving, watching the snowfall. So Snowmageddon. What did you call it?
Yeah, Snowzilla.
Snowzilla.
Yeah, and 64 degrees is like what I keep my house at.
Seriously?
So, yeah.
So growing up, my house was always really cold, and it was always really hot. And so Christiana and I were both like, man, once we have our own place, we are making it whatever temperature we want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we're going to pay for it, and we're going to be okay with it.
Yes.
So we always make our house pretty comfortable.
Which means warm for you.
Correct.
We can tell by the redness of your face.
my
Apparently your house is so warm that you've been suntanning.
Yeah. So I got out on Sunday. Was it Sunday? No, I didn't even start shoveling till Monday. So it was on Monday. It was probably like 10:30 or 11, and I start shoveling, and this is heavy snow, right? It's not like normal light fluffy snow. It's like you get to the bottom of it, and it's like wet slush.
Yeah.
And so I start shoveling, and my next door neighbor is my brother-in-law, Jason, and he's out there shoveling, and he has like teenagers, so they're all helping him as well. I have my 7-year-old daughter who's out there trying to shovel snow with me. And it ended up turning into a snowball fight for a while. They all started making snowmen. I'm still shoveling. But then we ended up building this big like hill and turning it into this big slide. And some of the other kids built this like igloo castle thing. And it was fun. I was the first one out and the last one in. I was probably the biggest kid of the day. And my face and my neck, my daughter Karia called me redhead. She said, Dad, you won. I said, what? She's like, you won at getting the reddest head.
The reddest head.
Thanks.
Good
That's
job,
super
Jerry.
nice.
Good job, Jerry.
So lots of aloe and cold rags, and we have another friend that she got burned so bad that her face was swelling. Oh. So she's like, is your face swelling? I'm like, no. Like, is your face swelling? That's not good.
Yeah.
So did you guys, any fun stories from your Snowzilla experience?
Me and my kids went out with Sarah on Monday, I guess. We shoveled all day Sunday. Then Monday they went out in the morning while I was working and did some sledding and then built like igloos and tunnels and all that kind of stuff. My wife was like in heaven. She's from South Dakota.
Yeah.
So this is like regular from like June to, no, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. August to June. This is what life is like in South Dakota. They get one good month in July. And so she was just in heaven building tunnels and all that kind of stuff.
Her heaven and my heaven are different places.
Very different, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love Colorado because of how fast everything melts away.
Yeah.
And like Iowa, it doesn't do that. And here it's like as soon as it's done, you can just see the steam coming off everything, which is kind of a cool Colorado experience as well.
Yeah.
So what about you, Reagan? Anything exciting?
No, I didn't do anything exciting. We just watched it come down on Sunday. My sister and I, we lived together. And then she shoveled. I don't do any shoveling at our house. That's her job. I do the dishes. She does the shoveling. And so she shoveled a little bit on Sunday. And then Monday, she had to like shovel several times, like a path for the dogs
Mm-hmm.
to go out. I just watched her and I encouraged her.
Yeah, coached her up.
Yeah, we have a snow blower, and so I just clapped watching her
Yeah,
do it.
yeah.
That was my job.
It was so heavy. Our neighbor's snowblower quit working. And
Yeah.
like,
Really? Yeah.
It couldn't handle
Yeah.
the heaviness of the snow.
Yes, it was
Yeah.
very
Very
wet.
rarely do we have to like shovel into the street to be able to
Yes.
get out. But you know, I think the last time I had to do that was 10 years ago. But it definitely happened this time.
Yep.
If you wanted out, you had to shovel the street
Yep.
for yourself.
Yeah,
Yes.
and actually we had one guy, the snowplow guy. He did basically the whole town, but then our street, he did one line and stopped like right at our driveway, and then just backed out of the space that he did, and then he left. And we're
Oh
like,
my gosh.
And so, and he ended up coming back later.
Yeah.
After a phone call, not from me, but from somebody that I know.
Yes.
And he came and did the rest of it. But I'm like, you just made us stuck.
Yeah.
We're here forever.
That's right. So, but it's good. Snow days are fun, and we haven't had one like that in a long time. So it was kind of it was good to
Yep.
to experience that, and it was fun for our kids and things like that. But I think that you actually have put together some trivia for us, Reagan.
Yes.
Some man trivia, and so if you're playing or listening at home, you can play along to this man trivia, and we'll see how Matt and I do. So if you want to rock and roll on the trivia, and I won't look at the answers. I don't know if you put the answers on.
No,
here
I didn't
anyway.
put
Okay,
the answers
that's good
because most of these I don't know the answer,
Oh,
which was
oh.
really fun.
So if we just say it convincingly,
Yeah, I won't know
get-
the difference.
all right.
great.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay, so the correct way to shave your face is
with a razor.
with a razor. Yes. Whatever you use,
Uh-huh.
against or with the grain.
Yeah, I think the right answer is with the grain, but I mow because my face grows out so fast. Like I get my 5 o'clock shadow at noon,
Uh-huh.
so I just use like hair clippers.
I get my 5 o'clock shadow on Wednesday.
Wednesday, yes. So you maybe have the right answer to this.
And actually, you'll be able to tell because my face is so burned, I can't shave it. I'm, like, I'm not
Right.
going to touch that until it's healed. So we'll see how
Okay,
nasty
so
it gets.
if it's long enough, you can go against the grain. No
Okay.
damage done, right? Is that what you're
I think
saying?
you're supposed to go with. I don't even know.
I think you're supposed to go with the grain.
Do you use when you shave it? Do you use an electric razor still, or do you use an actual razor?
Yeah, electric.
It's always electric. Yeah, and I think with electric too, I don't know if it makes as big a difference or not.
Yeah.
Because you just shave it off. Mm-hmm.
Okay, good to know.
So we don't have the answer for it.
Apparently, we don't know.
Well, I know how it works for women.
I'm giving
not for
myself
men.
a point.
So,
Bing. Oh, I can give it to you. Oh, I'm sorry. You got it wrong. There it is. I'm
Okay.
not a good reader. That one says Buzz and that one says Bell.
Freudian slip.
That's right.
okay, what is Kanye West's sneaker line called?
You don't know the answer to this?
Oh, I know the answer. To
Oh,
this
okay.
one.
I got it too.
It's Nike. Just kidding.
Air Kardashian.
Is it really?
Mhm.
Oh, is that correct?
No. no. Well, you
But
made
I
me,
said it confidently.
You did. You made me second guess myself.
I had
but
no idea. I'm like,
I'm surprised.
Sure.
You're
Isn't
wearing
it?
your,
Isn't it Yanzi or Yahtzee or
Yeezy.
Yeezy? There's
Yeah.
where it's at.
Yes.
There's where it's
That's
at.
good.
Yeezy. I expected more from you wearing your
Yeah.
Kanye for President shirt.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Today.
I got this
I
next
mean,
one.
I knew when I wrote this one, this was going to be stupid because this is a throwaway for Matt. But Thor is the god of
Thunder.
And lightning, Jared.
Is it both?
It's both.
Oh.
thunder and lightning. Okay.
Twinkle fingers.
So is
We need each
Thor
other.
like a Greek god, or like where does Thor find
I don't
its
know where
origins?
Thor
He's from-
lives in the mythology.
from Marvel?
Yeah, he's a Marvel.
Right.
He's a
I
Marvel
just
god.
wonder if he has like a Greek history. I don't know.
Maybe Brando can chime in. Brando, are you in the other room? I think you know this.
Greek.
Good. He's on
Roman?
HBO Max.
Yeah, he's
Okay.
watching.
He's probably like Greek or I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah,
He doesn't know either.
he's one of those guys. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So dress code. If
Okay.
your shoes are black, what color should your belt be?
Black.
Does it have to be that way?
It has to be in the same scheme.
If you want to,
Okay.
if you don't want to get made fun of,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay. No
So
black
if-
belt, brown shoes.
right,
Ever.
right.
You're
that's
not
a bad-
supposed to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But
Or if you're
Ever
wearing
is
a
a
shirt,
little strong though.
yeah. I mean, if you're wearing a shirt that's covering your belt anyway, it doesn't matter,
right. Okay.
right? But if you have a tucked-in nice shirt, it
I
should
only
match.
care 30% of the time,
Yeah.
and only 50% of the time on Sunday.
Yeah.
So
Well, okay.
Some-
A follow-up
something to watch.
question: do you always wear a belt?
yes,
Yes.
If I forget, it's a problem.
Okay. That's so interesting to me.
You're not a belt wearer?
No, for girls it's just more of an accessory than a necessity.
Yeah.
Oh.
I don't have hips, so my pants just fall off.
I guess that must be what the deal is.
Maybe
I
that's
don't know.
why mine fall off too. I haven't thought that deeply about it, but belts are important.
That's so interesting.
Keeps your pants on.
Okay, if you had no GPS, what would you use for directions, or how would you ask for directions?
With a map?
What do you do? You know how to use a map?
Yeah.
Both of you?
Yep, I can use a map. But
Okay.
in Colorado, we have the mountains always to the
That's
west.
true.
Yes.
You always
And
know
For
where
so
it is.
if you're on the front range, and so it makes, so everybody here in Colorado oftentimes gives directions like north, west, east, south
Yeah.
because of the mountains.
Okay.
That's the way I
that
do
was
it.
quicker
Easy
than I
peasy.
thought it would be.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you're going to buy a used car.
Mm-hmm.
What are the most important things to look for?
That's a good question. I don't know anything about cars.
Okay.
And so I have a buddy named Nathan. And if Nathan says buy it, then I do. If Nathan says don't buy it, then I don't.
And he never tells you why.
I don't even care.
I've bought enough used cars and had things that broke that those are usually the things that I look for. So I drive around and I listen to how it's changing gears. I'll check the tires to see how much tread, because I don't want to buy a car. I assume that the reason it's used is that someone traded it in because something was breaking. And so
So do you ever take it to a garage to have them check it out? Or do you just like free will it?
it depends. Like this last one, our car broke down on the way, so we had to leave with something. So
Nice.
we finally got it there, and we were trading it in because we just kept having issues with it. And yeah, so I mean, we checked. You know, I look at the engine just because it's the right thing to do. But I'm like, there it is. Yep, good.
Oh man, I always take
It
it to a
exists.
garage and I pay like the $60 or whatever it is, and I say, "Tell me everything wrong with it,"
Yeah.
and then I
okay.
go back to the place and I make them fix it.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
that's
what I do.
smart.
that's
Yeah.
a smart thing to do.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
for next time. So that's
for
what you
next
look
time.
for. You look for a mechanic to look at your car.
Yes, his name is Nathan.
Yes.
I
like
like
it.
this.
He happens to be a worship leader up at Fort Lupton as well.
Oh yes.
Yes.
Yes,
if
yes.
you're looking for the specific Nathan.
That's right. Got it. So for future references. No, that's good. So, man, we are talking about something that I think affects 90% of humans anymore. And so we're calling it shameful sex in the shadows, but really we want to avoid that word shame because shame is, I think, a tool of really the enemy to not expose the things that we really struggle with, or that I always say that we all have a big ugly inside of us that we're trying to hide. And so Scripture tells us, hey, bring that stuff out in the open, and then it's not going to have the same kind of hold over you. And so pornography is something that is rampant in our culture. Different people, I've even had, I've posted stuff on Facebook where people will come back and say, what's wrong with you? There's nothing wrong with it. I can't believe, it's just a normal way to express sexuality. We're going through our fostering process. And basically the state's, side of it is they just want to make sure that it's not accessible to anybody that would come into your house. They don't care if you're watching or not watching or whatever. They just want to make sure that it's like if you have guns in the house, they want to make sure it's in a safe, that it's protected or whatever. And so it's just really interesting, the different sides and the different perspectives. And obviously coming from a Christian perspective, we have our take on it as well. And so I think that we just wanted to open up the conversation today because we know that it's something that is real, that especially it's becoming more and more rampant with females as well as males, but definitely with males. Man, I can talk to almost every guy I know that has had some sort of interaction with pornography in their life. And so we just want to remove that veil, remove the mask, and say, let's have an open and honest conversation about that. And so the first thing, I guess I'll just turn it to you, Matt, is if you can remember back, when was your first experience with pornography or with naked girls, or however you want to address that question? So,
Yeah. I think everybody remembers their first time, their first experience with that. So I guess what I would say is I'm thankful that I grew up in the 90s where it wasn't as accessible as it is today. Like, if you wanted to access porn in the 90s, like you had to go to a magazine shop or you had to find a way into that space.
even when the internet came,
Yeah.
You had to wait for the dial-up. That's right.
Right? Yeah, all of that up, and like who knew how to find it in that space and that. So I think that growing up, my parents were, I didn't have access to it. It wasn't in our house. I went to a Christian college, and this was probably before like all the lawyers got involved, but they had like huge restrictions on the internet, and things were getting blocked all the time and stuff. And so probably good for me. It wasn't readily accessible where I could get to it all the time, which I think actually served me well in life. But the first time I remember was probably in my early teenage years. My friends and I, we found this like strip poker games CD, CD-ROM. Remember when you put that in the computer? And
Do tell.
And yeah. So there are these things in the 90s, like our computers didn't just have memory in them. You had to have CDs, and all these games came on CDs, and they loaded up. And so we found that and played that game, and like I said, I remember it. I remember the feeling of escape. I remember the kind of the intoxicating feeling of lust in that space, even as a 13, 14-year-old kid in that space. And the reason I say that I think we all remember it is because those experiences like sear into our memories. God created the human body beautiful. And he created us with sexual desire. And when that sexual desire goes bad, that's called lust. And that's what we experience, is something that is innately good, but turned wrong. And but we have all those intoxicating feelings that come with it.
Yeah. I know for me, one of the things was always curiosity. I wanted to know, what was it? How did it work? All of those things. That was really my initial driver into things. I remember, I don't even know how, but my friend and I found like a Sports Illustrated swimsuit, magazine, which, that's kind of my first youngest memory of going, oh, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And that was kind of the spark of my curiosity. And I feel like there's just like a box laying outside on the street or something that we found, kind of like the Mighty Ducks.
Look at me.
Have you seen the original Mighty Ducks movie? How they found them? And I'm like, that's interesting that I kind of had that same kind of experience. And, and so then, same with you. But I'm a little bit younger. And so internet became more of a thing as I grew up, being able to access it and things like that. So, I think the age of exposure is getting younger and younger. And I think the average age of exposure now is like 7, is the last I heard. So, but what about you, Reagan, from a female perspective? I know that it's becoming more and more of an issue with females as well. And so I don't know kind of where you land on any of that stuff.
Yeah, well, I was first exposed to it when I went on like our family laptop. Our family had 2 laptops, and there was this weird image on the desktop, and I clicked it, and it was porn from when my brother had last been on it. I don't mean to rat him out at all. We know about it. We've dealt with it. Yeah. But I remember immediately taking it to my parents. And knowing that something was wrong, but I also, I remember the image distinctly, and I remember that it didn't look real. And so that was my first run-in with it. But then I think what enticed me personally was like romance novels. Specifically, I know that there's women's blogs that talk about it. Oh, it's porn, and but we don't talk about like how graphic those things are. And we can be exposed to the graphic nature of those things, like through images and then through written words. So that was more of the inlet for me. And then just casually watching TV now, like you can't watch a TV show without being exposed to porn, pretty much. My boyfriend and I were watching Yellowstone recently. And Yellowstone is this cowboy show. Yeah. And I grew up on a farm, and my dad is a rancher, and so we're watching this, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's porn in here, and it's normal. Yeah. And so, and then experiencing feelings of arousal from things like that.
Yeah, it's interesting the normalization of different things in our culture, and even like the show Friends, right? It's they're really pushing normalization in that show a lot. Christiana and I will watch it sometimes, and she's like, because we used to watch it with my parents, in high school, and she's like, you watched this with your parents? Like, how are you okay? How are they okay with that? You know? And I'm like, I don't know. We just kind of buzzed over it, I guess. Or didn't think. I don't know. It was just. It was that slow introduction into normality, and so that's where we're at today. Where for a lot of people, I think that they just go, it's not a big deal. It's a normal thing, and I don't know why you'd have issues with it. Like, it's people's choices of what they want to do. But did you notice, Matt, as you were introduced to it and things like that? Was it an initial thing where you go, man, this is wrong and I know it's wrong? Or was that something that you had to kind of process through?
No, I think innately I knew that it was wrong. It didn't quench the desire for more, in that space. And so I think that anytime, I think there's innately in all of us, when we see something as intimate that pornography shows us, that there is a innateness in us that's private, right? Like that's reserved for something else. And so I think that there is that innate initial reaction of something's wrong with this, and the hiding that happens and the shame that goes along with it and all that kind of stuff. And there's reasons for that, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a few minutes. But yeah, no, it was apparent to me that it was wrong. But when you tap into that desire, it's hard to put back in the box.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's like anything else, any other sin or habitual sin or thing like that. I mean, there's a sense of, we'll talk about this a little bit too, about how just that craving can become addictive. But also, the more you do anything, the more you're able, it's like your tolerance level for it goes up. And so that's true with anything that we do, right? If I'm a habitual stealer, and I keep stealing things, before you know it, I'm not just stealing candy anymore. I'm stealing cars, and I'm able to justify it in my own heart and mind. And so I think that there's a piece of that as well, that maybe initially we all have that, but somehow people get to a place where they go, oh, it's okay. It's not a problem.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
This is actually, when I think about how to talk about this with my kids, because that's really big, right? Right. When you get into marriage and you start having your own kids, everything that you've done in your past affects your marriage. And you can say it doesn't, you can pretend it doesn't. And I always knew that was true if I had multiple sexual partners, like that would be drug in. I never thought that pornography would be drug into my marriage. And I learned very quickly the impacts that it has. And now even with my kids, thinking about how can I help prepare them to handle it when it's so rampant and easily accessible, so that when they're all grown up and they're out of the house, they're able to handle it in a way that doesn't ruin their future relationships or ruin their future marriages. And so I'm just curious, Matt, with you, how has any of this affected your guys' relationship in your marriage, or has it affected the way that you parent your kids?
Yeah, so like I said, I think that thankfully I was pretty protected as a kid in the 90s and then going to a Christian college, that it wasn't accessible to me. And so while I had like points of contact with it, and like one of the most vivid memories in college is somebody figured out how to get around the firewall, and so we had meeting after meeting, in the guys' dorms of them trying to like weed out who it was, and everybody was like quiet.
It was me. I did it.
That's right. Raise your hand. Who wants to go with their deepest, darkest sin first? And so, so thankfully, while I've had experiences with porn and in that space, it never got to a place where it was out of control, and probably not because of anything that I did, more so because of the accessibility of it. Like a lot of times I look at my life with having a pretty addictive personality, and so I'm pretty careful in terms of all of that, what that looks like, just because I know myself in that space. And so, but when you look at the way that pornography has affected our society and our culture, like it's really scary, particularly having 3 kids, and my oldest is 12. He'll be 13 this month. And, The age that pornography industry aims for is 10 to 12-year-olds, both boys and girls, because if you can get them hooked puberty, then you have a lifelong subscriber in that space. And so we have certain things, and it's a pain in the butt, but everything has a pin on it in our house. And so you can't get past really anything that's PG or PG-13 in our house without a pin. And it makes things hard and a pain as a parent and all that kind of stuff, but it's worth it in order to protect my kids. And I think that when it comes to like pornography and really the idea of lust, is that lust is what like dishonors the object of your affection, right? And God ultimately. Like the object of your lust, whether it's a man or a woman, the reality is that you're not treating them as sacred, as precious, as eternal, as image bearers of God, right? You're dehumanizing them. And in order to dehumanize another person, you have to put aside the promises of God and even have to dishonor God, the promises that he gives. And so you have this struggle is what we call it, right? This moment of escape, this false sense of worth, unsatisfactory feeling of love for a moment in that space. And I think that the way that has played out in marriages, I do a lot of counseling through my 15 years as a pastor in this area. And what I've seen over and over again is that in marriage, we call it a struggle, that pornography is a struggle, but really what it is just blatant infidelity, right? Like for a moment, you're taking off your ring, you're ignoring your vows, and you're indulging yourself in this space. And over time, the effects of dehumanizing people, you lose interest in your spouse. I think emotionally, you begin to distance yourself from your family and from friends, and you lose your ability to truly love. That all comes with the dehumanizing of, in essence, what porn or lust does is when we begin to dehumanize, we begin to lose those things. And I think, as we talk about the normalization of porn in our culture, in our world, I think that some of the things that we see in life that we look at and go, man, that's actually we would classify as dehumanizing. That's where it starts to spill out.
Yeah, it's always the slow, right?
Yeah,
it's the
absolutely.
slow cooked frog in the pot, that it's not like this immediate thing, but as it starts to ooze out, and I like that you use the word indulging. You're indulging yourself, right? And so once that's okay, then it's the next thing.
Yep.
Right. And once that's okay, then it's the next thing. And so that's how I think that we look around our culture now and see all these things that like, man, how did we get here? It's just that slow little, and it's always been with the internet. Everything has sped up, right?
Yeah.
And so we find ourselves where we are today, And the thing I didn't realize how much it would affect healthy sex in my relationship now with my wife, because not that. I mean, my parents would always say, you don't have sex with other people because then your wife will compare it with and it's not necessarily the comparing thing. It causes different triggers in her that I don't think would have previously been there. And so it really does, it messes with how good it can be in your relationship. And so I just don't think that gets talked about a lot, and that a lot of even people who think that it's okay, there is a moment, I don't know when it happens, but there is a moment when a woman realizes that what she is doing is having an effect on a man. And I think that a lot of middle schoolers and high schoolers don't yet know the effect and power that they have over men around them. And so they dress provocatively, or they do things and they just think, oh, this is just a normal thing. And they don't realize what's going on in the guy's head around them. Maybe some of them do. But there's definitely a moment after a woman gets married that something switches and changes, and all the things that she thought were okay before suddenly becomes not okay anymore. I don't know. I've seen it over and over and over again. I saw it with my own wife, and I've seen it with other people that I know where they were okay with things. They're like, man, I don't know how I was okay with doing that. And so even as you're dating, you may be under this false pretense that, hey, the things that I'm indulging in right now aren't actually going to affect my marriage down the road. And then all of a sudden you get married and that switch goes off where all of a sudden, I think part of it is because you're theirs now and you're theirs forever. And it's fair for them to be jealous of you because you are now theirs, right? We talk about, or I talk about, like, jealousy being okay. A lot of times people say, oh, you can't be jealous. You can't be jealous. God is a jealous God, right? And God is a jealous God because we belong to him, and he doesn't want to share us with anybody else. The same is true with your spouse. So if Christiana is jealous for any reason, as long as it's not like driving you to do, like it's like anger, right? It can drive you to sin. As long as it's an emotion that's not driving you to sin, I think it's okay to actually have that emotion because we belong to each other, right? And I belong to her, and she belongs to me, and that's the way that God designed it to work and to be. And so I just, man, if I could say anything to anybody who is not yet married and is into porn or into a lot of other things too, and for the girls out there that might be listening as well, that everything you do and every decision you make when it comes to your sexuality is absolutely going to affect the health of your marriage and the things that are going to work in your marriage. And so that's when I think about my kids, that's the message that I want to be able to speak into them over and over again. You know? And so Reagan, you're not married, you're dating. I don't even know what question I have. Just
No, that's okay.
do you have thoughts or responses or maybe that switch has gone off with you already? Maybe you remember that experience. So anything that you would like to add, I'd love to get some of your thoughts and insights there.
Yeah, I mean, I can say
I went off on a wild tangent there.
No, that's okay. So. I have a lot to say about this subject. So when we were brainstorming specifically this topic, what we kind of identified or what we wanted to get at was there's going to be a time when we realize, or when other people realize, if not only us, that porn doesn't fit in their lives in the same way, that at least experientially, we're all going to come to this point where we realize, oh my gosh, my actions affect my relationships, right? And so for men and women listening, as I was preparing for this, I really asked the question, why is this a bad thing? Or why do we not want to do this? We as Christians were assuming, oh, it's bad. But I think that we lose a lot of the power of our voice when we don't answer that question, why? And so doing some research for this, I found that porn is viewed as, let's see, how do I want to phrase this? Less immoral than not recycling. So we know, so if you don't recycle,
that's an interesting.
Isn't that interesting? Isn't that
particularly
interesting?
in Colorado?
So, yeah.
Right. So you don't recycle. That's immoral, but porn is, it's here or there. And then Christians typically feel more shame about it than non-Christians. And I've had conversations with friends at seminary, actually, that find porn to be a neutral thing. And so I don't want to assume that this isn't a common thought. Okay, so is porn actually a neutral thing for men and women? And we know the science behind...
Neutral as in not good or bad?
Yeah,
Okay.
Morally neutral. So the science behind pornography tells us that we get a serious dopamine dump when we encounter porn, when it's something so visually stimulating that you've created this dopamine at such a high level, at such a rapid rate, that can't be recreated until you look at it again, and until you look at it again in a higher capacity. So kind of poking at what you were saying earlier, well, we kind of noticed this pattern of it increases in demand the more that we look at it. Well, you can't recreate that dopamine dump without visual stimulation like that and without it getting greater over time. Well, here's the thing. We cannot, that's an artificial dopamine dump, and no human can recreate that for you. Your wife, your husband cannot recreate that for you. So in turn, what this is going to result in is isolating you from your relationships. You can't connect to your wife. You can't connect to your husband in this way that your body and mind now expects you to. And something that the Apostle Paul talks about is sin or habits owning him and driving him. And so there's going to be this point, I think, in all of our journeys where we realize porn and other things ultimately are controlling me and my life, and I'm not controlling it. I'm not living in line with my values. My kids are exposed to this, something that I love dearly. My marriage is hurting over this. And from personal experience, I ended an engagement over a sexual addiction that my ex-fiance had. The wedge that drove between us, I think, was directly correlated to he had no control over himself, but this habit did. And I don't want to isolate men in this because women are just as susceptible to it. And I constantly have to ask myself, is this attempting to own me and my life, or am I still in control of it? And the thing is, that's a very fine line to ride, so fine that it's probably not worth riding it, you know?
Yeah. And I think a lot of times too, people will say, I'm okay with it. But then deep down, if they know that their significant other is partaking, it wouldn't make you feel good. Like, you know, and so even people that say, yeah, it's okay, it's not a big deal. I think that once the rubber hits the road, you're probably going to be singing a different tune, you know? Yeah. I had a question and it escaped me. And so, it wasn't a question. I just wanted to say there's a really cool website, actually. It's called Fight the New Drug. And they are a nonprofit, but they're also a non-religious organization. And they've done actual research on the human brain and how pornography affects the brain. And so it's something that I found a while ago that I just really appreciate the way that they approach everything. They have, different tools to help people who want to stop and because it's like getting off a drug. And they've seen that because of the dopamine and things along those lines, that it actually causes an addictive behavior similar to cocaine, similar to marijuana or any other addictive drug. It has the same pull on your brain. And so I think that's important for us to understand that there are actual steps and things that you need to do if it's something that you want to stop. And so I would call it a really good lifeline. And the reason I really love it is because it's not coming from a biblical perspective. I mean, obviously from us in the church, we go, it's wrong, it's lust, it's sin, you can't do it. But for someone who cares nothing about the church, they're going to go, so what? You know, and they come at it from a science perspective where they say this is what's happening, and they actually talk about here's how pornography sites are tied to sex trafficking, and here's the actual links that you can see how every time you are clicking, it is affecting these women and men around the world. And so I would just encourage anybody that would like to learn more about that, just go to fightthenewdrug.org, and you can learn all about. They even have videos there, so if you hate reading, that's okay. You can watch a video, and it looks, I'm on the website right now too. It looks like they have their own podcast as well. They have articles, all kinds of good stuff on there to help you as you go through that. So there is one more topic about this that I want, that Matt, you kind of touched on it, but you didn't really dive into it yet. I'm just curious, your thoughts on why, especially maybe with Christians, because it sounds like maybe with non-Christians it's not as big, but at least with Christians, there's so much shame tied into pornography. And I'm curious, it seemed like you had some insight on that. And so I just wanted to pass that ball back over to you and see your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think just going off of what Reagan said, I think that a big passage in this that we have from Scripture is actually 1 Corinthians chapter 6, right? Where you have the Corinthian church, and in Corinth, the society, the culture is the sex god. And there was a huge temple to a sex god there. And so it was a regular part of culture for you to worship at the temple, and worshiping the temple meant, you picked your kids up after school, you stopped by the temple, you ran in, saw one of the temple prostitutes, jumped back in the car, got dinner on the way home, and that was it. It was like a normal way of life. And Paul addresses it in 1 Corinthians chapter 6 in such a way that he says, look, and he takes it all the way back to creation, man and woman, the intimacy that we share. And it's almost as if in that passage they're going, yeah, it's not really a big deal. Like everybody does it, it's not a big deal. And Paul eventually gets to the space where basically what he's saying is that we all have like an intimacy meter in our created for intimacy. That's what we are, right? To be fully known, fully loved without the fear of rejection. That's what intimacy is biblically. And when we engage in pornography, when the Corinthians engaged in temple prostitution, what Paul is saying is that sexual sin, while there's not a hierarchy of sin, it does hit us differently. It does affect us differently. It dings our intimacy. And if we the thing that we truly desire as humans is intimacy with other people. Mm-hmm. And the greatest gift that God's given to us is to have intimacy with a spouse, deep, deep intimacy with a spouse. And when we open up the sexual sin, the gateway to the sexual sin in our life, what we're doing is we're constantly dinging the intimacy. And the thing that we desire most, we don't actually experience. And when we know that we're the cause of that, because we're opening the door, that's when the shame floods in. When we realize that we're dehumanizing other people, when we realize that we're making people objects of our affection, all of that shame starts to pile in. And if you're a believer, I would say that that's true even if you're not a believer. Maybe you suppress that or whatever, but the reality is that your intimacy is getting dinged. If you're a believer, it comes with the added weight of, like, what does God think about this? And sadly, in our culture, like, we've believed that if I'm a really good Christian, then I won't have these, like, after pornography situations, right? Like, if I was really good, then I would stay away from this. And it's in those moments where I think Satan, like, weaves his best webs for us, where we get caught and we start to question who our God is and what our God's about. And then that just piles on the shame even higher on us. And then when we're sitting in that shame, the only way that we can think of to get out is to experience the high again. And so we go back, right? Not because we want to, but because we can't live in the shame. And then the cycle just repeats itself over and over and over again. And so, like, I think addictive pornography has a lot to do with the repetitive nature of shame and trying to come out of that shame. And then it gets more hardcore, right? More dehumanizing of people, greater and greater, until you're completely isolated because your intimacy has been completely dinged in such a way that you can't experience intimacy with anybody in your life.
Which is very similar to a drug addiction, right? I mean, it all works the same. It's just a different vice.
It's why they have gateway drugs, right? Like, there's gateway drugs that you get started on, and then eventually you make it to the heroin. Eventually you make it to the harder core drugs.
And what sucks about our society and our culture is that we're more and more getting to the gateway drug to pornography is everywhere that I look, on every TV show that I watch. And so I think that as parents, that's where we have to be very diligent of. It's that fine line, right, between teaching them how to handle it in a healthy way and not exposing them to things too quickly.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it, the naturalization that's happened in our culture when you and I were kids, right, 90s, you early 2000s, like, we would have never thought in a million years that CBS, network television, would broadcast a Victoria's Secret runway show. And yet they have, right, on national TV. For anybody, like, you don't have to pay for it, you don't have to, right, you can just turn it on if you have an antenna. And so there's been this, like, normalization in our culture of what we would call soft in that space. But for a 12-year-old boy, a 12-year-old girl, those images sear into their mind. This is what I'm supposed to look like. This is what I'm supposed to look for.
That's one of the things that blows my mind. And I still can't understand, like, this fight for feminism and dignity and, equality, and yet you don't it's like they don't match, like, the sexualization of how you're conducting yourself in one space and then what you're saying in another space, and that it doesn't actually match. And that's one of the things I think that drives me crazy is I'm like, man, like, at least pick a lane, but so if someone is struggling, and how do we, because I feel like the church throughout history has been really bad with handling sexual sin in a way that when someone is feeling shameful, it's hard for them to come out and be open about it. It's hard for them to have honest conversations about it because they're afraid they're going to get judged, or they're afraid that they're going to be rejected, right? And so what are some steps that somebody could take? I mean, obviously you can go to Fight the New Drug. There's other resources out there. But if you were talking to somebody and you said, what is step one in helping you walk out of this habitual sin, what would be your answer?
Yeah, Reagan, you want to go first? You want me to go first?
You go first.
All right. So I would say step number one is fight the self-hatred
Mm-hmm.
that comes with pornography. Like, I think the church has done a disservice. They lack in this area. It's either all external or all internal.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is that it's got to be both.
Yeah.
Like, the gospel has to be relevant to the person who fails and tries again,
Mm-hmm.
fails and tries again, fails and tries again, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if we're ever going to be liberated from the grip of porn, we have to realize that we can't live in the excuses,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's enough tools out there to protect us from what we would naturally go to or want to go to. So it has to be both internal and external. And so I would say, like, the first step would be to fight the self-hatred, like to warp human dignity of another not only affects that person, right, that we're the object of our affection, but it also affects us. And it causes us to criticize and detest ourselves, knowing what we did. When we hold the image of, when we believe in the image of God, that we are image bearers of God, and when we treat someone as less than that, the natural consequence of that is self-hatred. And the reality is that God is patient with us more than we can ever imagine, and that God's fighting for you. And John 10:10 says that, that the enemy comes to kill and destroy. But Jesus said, I came to give life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's so important for us to remember when we are in the sin of pornography, when we're feeling the shame, when we're failing again and again and again, that we have to fight that self-hatred to begin with.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to remember that God actually wants you to be successful.
Yeah.
And he's not he's not just waiting for the gopher to come out to smash him with a hammer.
Yeah.
That
It's not a Greek God waiting,
That's
to
right.
hit us with lightning.
That's right. Yeah. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that, Reagan, as we're wrapping up here?
I was going to bring up John 10:10 as well.
Sorry, Matt took it.
I know. That's smarter. Let's be real. The enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And I think one of the ways that we can actively combat that is confessing it to someone. So I have a counselor in my life that I can scream the truth to if I need to, because I think that the scariest part is that in between period of I have this sin going on, but I haven't said it yet. Like, that is honestly the scariest part. Saying it isn't. And so confessing the truth in all of its gross reality, I think is step one. And that also helps you combat that self-hatred, because the enemy's working with you and your self-hatred in the space inside of your head. But bringing someone else into that, confessing that in all of its reality, that frees you to an extent. And so I would always say that no matter how ugly, there's someone who can hear it, and you need to find that person.
Yeah, that person. I think that it's important too that you just don't go broadcasting out to everybody,
Yeah.
Michael Scott-esque.
Right.
I could see him doing that.
I declare bankruptcy.
That's right.
I think it's finding the person who won't excuse you,
Yes.
and also won't crush you.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's a fine line in between that. Someone who will hear your confession and bring hope into your life.
Yeah.
And the thing about sexual sin is it causes us to hide and to isolate
Yes.
and think that we're all alone. And, that's maybe one of the greatest tools of the enemy is to isolate us. Isolate us from holistic community where we're all on our own fighting the battle by ourselves. And that's a loss.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, again, taps into your lack of intimacy with other human beings. Right?
Yeah.
So.
And I think if we go down this road, like, another thing that I would add, or two other things that I'd add in this, is like to remember the promises of God. We have a whole book in the scriptures called Lamentations. It's a guy who's in the sorrow. And one of the greatest lamentations that he wrote is Lamentations chapter 3. We, write songs about it. And the words out of that is that the mercies of God are new every morning, right? Like every morning when we wake up. And then at the end of that lamentation, he says, the Lord is my portion, therefore I will have hope in him. And I think that the new mercies every morning can serve as kind of the emotional reset button that we need when we wake up. And the prayer, right, of the lamentor, of the person who's caught in shame, the person who's caught in the sorrow, is a reminder that God's at work in our lives. And it's an act of hope when we wake up in the morning, realize the mercies of God, who it is that God is for us, that he is fighting for us, that his mercies are new every morning. We can hit the emotional reset button, confess our sins, and move forward into that. And then, like, the other thing I would say is, we need to guard ourselves. There's plenty of platforms out there, from Covenant Eyes to X3 Watch, I would encourage people to delete and throw away pictures and magazines and clean the computers, right, and all of that, because at the end of the day, like the ability to limit your access into that will keep you from going back. And if you don't have a structure or a system that takes care of both the internal and the external, then you will 100% go back to it. Like that's just the reality. Yeah. And so you have to build the system. And so like the final thing that I would say is like really don't waste your regret. Yeah. When you're feeling that moment of regret, don't waste it. Allow God to use that in your life to draw near to someone that you're confessing sin to. Yeah. Allow it to God to work in that shame and in that regret, to clean out your heart, and then remember the mercies that God has for you in the morning.
Yeah, that's good. Well, Matt and Reagan, it's so good to be with you guys today, and thank you for being open and honest with some of these conversations that I think are not always easy to be open and honest about. But please check out Fight the New Drug if you haven't done that. There's all kinds of other resources out there. Know that Crossroads Counseling, we have a counseling center that you can look into as well through our website, crossroadsabc.com. Man, maybe that's what you need, is you need a counselor to help you walk through some of this stuff. And so check out some of that stuff. See, that's why I don't use the outro button. Is because I'm done with my music already and I haven't even shut up yet.
You have too many words.
I have too many words. Yeah.
I don't think it's the outro music.
It's the Jared. It's the Jared. Yeah. So check that out. Please visit our site and know that there are people out there. The right person is out there that is going to not crush you, but hold you accountable.
And there's hope.
There's hope.
Life, abundant life awaits you.
Now the outro music.
Yes.
Here it comes. See you next time.